All right, welcome back. Dave here talking about Russia, Ukraine, and how China and India are now basically moving toward Russia as a new bloc. All right, because of crappy foreign policy. And by the way, this was kind of long overdue anyway, because for those of us who for many years thought that this whole New World Order idea, this Klaus Schwab thing, was a bad future for this country. You know, by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy and you'll be a non-playable character. And I don't know, maybe you won't have feelings anymore. Maybe they're going to program that out of you. Maybe there's a new inoculation coming that can help, you know, people not to feel bad about what's coming. And, you know, with those biolabs that aren't in Ukraine, you know, those biolabs aren't there. No, there are no biolabs there. And the United States had nothing to do with those biolabs whatsoever. We all know that that's true because Facebook said so. By the way, I quit Facebook cold turkey, just like I quit Twitter cold turkey. Twitter, you know, I had a few patches there for a while, but I am no longer on these big tech platforms other than here on YouTube. Thank you, YouTube, for allowing me to speak freely to some degree, at least for now, right? Hasn't gone well for a lot of other news producers, news aggregates, including our friends over at RT. And thus I am watching RT thanks to Rumble. Thank you, Rumble, for being a place where RT can go. You can also see them over at Odyssey. And all of my videos, from what I can tell, are being mirrored over to Odyssey from both my music channel and the media channel, both going over to Odyssey as a nice blockchain channel. I don't know anything about it. Someone's going to have to explain to me what blockchain means. All right, so I'm just glad I've got a backup place. So here's what's happening, all right? The Western media continues to just pound this narrative. By the way, all of those so-called Trump America First candidates out there, most of them are carrying the water for Ukraine, a good majority. Some of them are a little more skeptical, but there is a very large contingency of so-called America First Republicans who are also just throwing in with the big narrative because, again, they don't want to look independent or they don't want to look outside the mainstream. So it's easier to get the donations of those people who are also on board with that. We are not worrying about our country anymore. We're worried about everything else except our country. Yes, I know gas prices fell like 10 or 20 cents and they're partying in the streets of California because it's like $6.80 a gallon instead of, you know, $7. So it's a great moment for California and for the rest of the country. So instead of being on life support, we're in critical condition. You know, the improvement is marginal at best. And they've already put memes out there or, you know, statements where expect that this isn't the last of rising gas prices because in order to fight Vladimir Putin, your gas prices are going to go up. And in addition, everything is Putin's fault, right? And again, if you're a Trump supporter, you might remember that everything is Trump's fault, right? And that phone call he made to Ukraine, remember, that was bad. He shouldn't have been inquiring about the laptop. Nope, he shouldn't have been asking those questions. And, you know, I tend to agree with Donald Trump that most likely that was a perfect phone call. I don't understand, you know, the obsession with that when we've got the sitting president of the United States and his son both up to their eyeballs in corruption when it comes to Ukraine. So it's a little bit rich, a little bit kind of out there to think that we're still going to go after Trump and his tax. They're still going after Trump's tax returns. He didn't pay any taxes. Good for, you know what, good for him if he didn't. All right, let's just put it out there. Good for him if he got away from it. I mean, the whole thing is a scam. The whole income tax thing is just, I do believe that's a form of theft. It's one thing to pay taxes on, you know, food or groceries or, you know, I don't know, non-perishable items, whatever it is. But, you know, it's just, this is like your income and your livelihood. It's not really a good way to encourage people who don't have a way out. I can't afford a tax attorney, so I can't find that sweet loophole that the big corporations have in order to get out of paying anything. So with that said, though, the foreign policy that we are pursuing is certainly ramping up this new union, this new world order, as I should call it, between Russia, China, and India. And this is something that had to happen, is going to happen, and it's not going to stop. If they stop trading in dollars, and there are signals that Saudi Arabia too is in on this, and they're supposed to be our buddies, right? Now, look, I don't like Saudi Arabia at all, but I'm sure they're going to be in on this because they hold everybody hostage. And then they have this little thing going on in Yemen that nobody really cares about, which is pure genocide. It's the slaughter of thousands of innocent people over how many years? But then, we've got this thing in Ukraine, which just, even though there's this element, the Azov battalion, we don't have to worry about these people. It's just in name only. They're no worse than the people who took over Seattle, like the Chop Zone people and the Azov battalion. I mean, it's about the same. There's really no difference other than the fact that these guys have this weird symbol. It's got like an X, and it's got like, well, anyway, it's you can Google the Azov battalion or DuckDuckGo it. Recently, I've heard DuckDuckGo is also throttling down searches for alternative information. So much for free speech from DuckDuckGo, right? Oh, we're not going to take your data, though. No, we're not going to track you, but we are going to send you to where we think you should be sent. Presearch.org, you might want to try that. I don't know how effective it is. I've been messing around with it, and I just want the truth. I want to be able to search for something and actually find it without, all of these biased articles that I'm supposed to read and click on. That's one of the reasons I had just had it. Every time I would land on Facebook, it would say things like, I know you're not sick, Dave, but please take this survey about COVID-19. I would be like, no, I don't want to take a survey. And then I would land more recently, and it had a donation link to Ukraine. There should be donation links to food pantries all over this country, as people are lining up in droves right now because they can't afford food or they can't afford gas, and they've decided to go with the food. But needless to say, how are they going to get to work? This is a domino effect, which is maddening. It really is completely avoidable. This was so avoidable. First of all, let's not get into the affairs of Russia, Ukraine. That's the basic kind of, simple-minded approach, not to actually break it down and find out why one half of Ukraine is beating up on the other half of Ukraine. You don't even have to know that stuff. All you have to do is like some foreign policy, some Ron Paul foreign policy, and say, you know what? This isn't our business. This has nothing to do with our vital national interests. Number one, right? Number two, we're giving 13 billion or something like that in foreign aid. I think they dialed that number down a bit. If it goes over $1 million, it's more money than we should be sending over there. If you want to do some humanitarian stuff and you want to send it through an organization, non-government entity, something like that, NGO type thing, I might be okay with that if it's not like the Clinton Foundation, maybe Samaritan's Purse. I don't know, something that's somewhat effective and uses the money for good. I might be okay with that. But I think that would be the extent to which I would get involved. But, we've got all of our foreign policy hawks up there, Victoria Nuland, who's been around for 1 million years, and she continues to just ramp it up. And she was given the green light by little Marco, as he just basically didn't expect to get that answer from her about the biolabs, and had to say, well, if there are biolabs, which I think you're admitting that there are biolabs, then, we know what the Russians are up to. Yeah, the Russians have the paperwork, by the way. They've got the paperwork, which means, they're going to go and share that paperwork and talk about having receipts, because they're going to have actual government documents about how these labs came to be, what's going on in these labs, and how they were trying to dispose of this very hazardous biological weaponry. They're trying to dispose of it before anybody would get there and find out what was actually happening in these biolabs. To me, that should be the story in all of this, that John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Barack Obama all signed off on this just wonderful deal, which ended up being regime change in Ukraine. And that regime change, again, you replaced a bad guy who you could probably deal with another bad guy who you're dealing with a lot better, but who's doing some of the worst things in human history, quite honestly, between the labs and between those Azov people that are running around and just doing whatever they want to. I mean, folks, this is really bad news for the country, for the world. But here's where I have a little hope in this. Take a little solace in this, is that if the Russians and the Chinese and India all kind of partner together, they form a bloc where they push back against this New World garbage and this NATO alliance, right? They can form their own alliance and call it the Freedom Alliance, call it the, I don't know, the Great Unreset. That would be awesome. We're doing the Great Unreset. You're trying to reset, we're trying to unreset. And I know this is kind of like deep diving for some people, but what are they going to do? Are they going to attack us? No, I think what they want us to do is mind our own business, and they'll mind their own business and produce their own food, energy. I mean, between China and Russia and India, but all, the three of them combined, they've got a ton of natural resources. They've got very serious and dedicated populations. They are tired of all of the American cultural crap. Now, China is a wild card because of their communist nature. And I'm not saying that I like China. I mean, we know about the Uyghurs. We know about the human rights violations that are just inexcusable. I'm not trying to put a happy face on China, but they're a disciplined people. And yes, the discipline comes from the dictatorship. And the dictatorship, for the most part, is very evil, but they know what they're doing, okay? They gave the West a beatdown in a press conference I heard yesterday from one of their representatives, basically calling out the West, saying, you know what? Everybody's tired of you guys running. This is, again, the Ron Paul philosophy. You're running around the world, you're setting up military bases, and then you're acquiring territory, and you're moving closer and closer to these countries that don't want to be involved with NATO and want the right to self-determination. And we do it all over the world. Venezuela, we're begging for oil from Venezuela. And we're trying to overthrow the country. And, Conservative Incorporated are like, yes, we need to replace and install Juan Guaido, because Juan Guaido is the actual president, and nobody there knew who that guy was for the most part, right? So it's very interesting how the United States, in their imperial ambitions, have now finally been called out by superpowers, powers that are really, because we're a weak country right now. We're led by a weak president. Our military, for better or worse, has become more woke through this process, and are being taught, how to deal with gender issues and things like that, and not focusing on, what the military is supposed to do. Meanwhile, Russia has a training video out there. We got these rugged Russians, getting out of the bed, girl next to the soldier who, obviously that was put there for a reason. Man, woman, strong dude, gets his gear and goes to war. And we're doing some animated video, which look, I'm not for, what's the word here? I'm not for discriminating against people or making fun of people or calling out people for their lifestyle choices. But this is not the way to promote the United States military. Okay. This is not a threatening thing to other countries. They're looking at this going, really? This is your, your demonstration video. This is your highlight reel. And meanwhile, these guys are out there doing target practice and blowing up things and flying planes perfectly. And look, this is what is called, better than what we are. This is definitely better. I'm not saying we're still, we do have a military presence and we are good and we have a ton of equipment, but Russia, China, and India, really? So that bloc, quite honestly, is probably just as powerful as NATO. And they'll get more countries to go in, I guarantee you, because almost every country on the face of this planet has been affected by the United States and its go everywhere and do everything military policy. And this, it's beyond the policeman of the world. It's more like the world designer. Like, we're going to design the world in our image, and tough toenails if you want your own image and you want to self-determine and, make your own way in this universe. You can't do it anymore because the United States is telling you and NATO countries are going to tell you. And I'm sorry, the West is looking real paltry right now compared to the other countries that are standing down what appears to be, this proxy aggression against Russia. And look, again, I don't like war. I'm not for war, but I had Pasta Jardula on my show, and you can watch that video in its entirety over on Rockfin. I had him on the show, and he said something to me, and it kind of pushed me back a little bit, like I pushed him back in the early days. He said, Dave, why do we have the right to speculate and argue if their entry into Ukraine was moral or immoral? Why do we should not be saying anything about that? And obviously we've blown that load like multiple times. So it's kind of like, you're not going to get any kind of backpedaling or retreat to say, you know what, let's just let this play out. It's not our job to get involved. We wish everybody well. We don't want anybody to die. We hate war. Let's pull back. Let's, pump the brakes a little bit. But we don't do that. We just are encouraging. A lot of people now are starting to just come out and say the United States is basically encouraging World War III, right? We're basically saying, hey, World War III, it's okay. We got mutually assured destruction. Remember that? It's still in effect. It hasn't, nobody rescinded that idea. Well, they launch a nuke, we launch a nuke, and then some other place launches a nuke, and then, the earth is kind of vaporized in just a few short minutes, and kiss your life goodbye and get right with God and all that good stuff, because that's it. That's the end. And at that point, the United States, I hate to say it, is definitely a catalyst for that. I'm not going to blame us for everything, but then again, look at our last 50 years, 60 years, our history of just always walking down the road to war. And we do it over and over again. And these countries know we're going to keep doing it. It's almost like we fell for Putin's trap here. But then, you get the commentators saying, no, Putin fell for our trap. Okay, so opposite day isn't working anymore because, you and I are smart enough to read and watch other things. You're not sitting there watching The View or MSNBC or whatever propaganda network who has a narrative that is basically directed from the CIA and the Department of Defense and all the usual players, including Homeland Security. And this is pretty sad that we don't have any sort of journalistic integrity to tell people, well, here's the other story. Here's the backstory to what's going on here. You can hear a lot about, Russian aggression. Well, let's talk about the aggression that came from Kiev and really was instigated against the people in the Donbass region. Let's spend 5 minutes talking about that on a national news channel that's, you know, owned and operated by oligarchs and people who probably have a ton of stock in the military. Do you know that Marjorie Taylor Greene has a ton of military stock? I don't care if it's part of a 401k. I don't really care. It's just ironic that that's the truth. And yes, she can talk against it, but she's basically the right side of the coin. You know, AOC is the left side and MTG is the other side. And yet they're both, you know, hey, I've got stock, but please, you know, stop saying this about Putin and Russia. Well, then divest what you own and you might have a little more credibility. I've been putting messages out on Gab, which is a lot of fun. If you haven't joined Gab, I think that's really the last bastion of pure free speech. And I do mean pure. I mean that RT America can post stuff on Gab if they want to. I mean, that's how pure I'm talking about. And there are a lot of messages I don't necessarily like over there, but people have the right to say them. People do. And if you don't want to see those messages, then don't go over to Gab. That's my advice. So the crux of this video is that it seems as though the United States and its amazing foreign policy has created a new bloc of countries which are prepared to go up against NATO and the United States. So I don't see how the United States comes out any better through this. The dollar is going to get destroyed, already getting destroyed. And we've got all kinds of problems ahead: energy, food, housing, education. You can go down the list of things that are going to be problematic for the future of this country if we don't decouple from this NATO alliance and get back to decentralized power and control of our own communities. We're not going to recover from this. We are going down a slippery slope, and we're going down at, you know, the Jamaican bobsled team rate of speed. So in any event, folks, that's my video on this topic. I get it if you don't agree. I mean, the Putin thing has just been ingrained into people. They don't trust Putin. Do I trust him 100%? I don't know. I watch the coverage and it's like serious information over here and then us telling one thing after, just putting out propaganda all day long. Now, the serious information could be propaganda, but there's no sensational nature to it. I watched that entire interview with Sergei Lavrov, who is a very serious person. And I just see that they're serious people and they don't want this to happen, but they believe they're ridding the world of something that everybody thought was gone after World War II. It never went away. It just went underground. It scattered. It reformulated. You know, it's kind of like the Terminator, you know, where that guy gets shot and all his particles go everywhere and then they all kind of gel back together. That's what we're watching right now. And there are groups all over the world that are probably cheering that battalion on. That's the scary thing. And if those people ever all get together in one place, I mean, good riddance to that kind of group of people. I would say at that point, we've all got a right to at least contain them. For now, we've got to figure out where they are and just how to get away from this, how to just mitigate it. So at some point, we can kind of get back to normal as a civilization. But this whole enterprise, this whole thing between the United States and really just the NATO bloc and then the new Russia, China, India bloc, we've bit off way more than we can chew here. And if we don't pull back, if we don't pump the brakes, it's just not going to go well. We're going to be in a lot of trouble. So in any event, I think most of you already know this, but it's amazing how things change so quickly. I mean, do I like China? No, but here we are, right? China, Russia, India. And India, smart country, they solved their own health crisis, and they did it with the Joe Rogan protocol. So good for them. That's my video. See you soon.